Along the sun-scorched highways of northern Mexico, where dusty roads cut through cartel territory like veins through a withered arm, a convoy of unmarked trucks carries cargo worth millions across the border. The Sinaloa splinter group known as Los Serpientes has never failed to take what they target. But on Route 15, they're about to discover that some prey bites back. For 15 years, Ray Mendoza was Delta Force's ghost driver, the man they deployed when high-value targets needed extraction from impossible situations. Now, as lead driver of a private security convoy, he's about to turn what seems like a routine ambush into a lesson the cartel will never forget. The unforgiving midday sun beat down on the 4-truck convoy as it wound through the narrow mountain pass. Towering rock formations on both sides created natural choke points along the dusty stretch of Mexican highway. To most drivers, the dramatic landscape might have appeared beautiful, even serene, but to Ray Mendoza, it screamed ambush territory. He'd driven through kill zones across Iraq, Afghanistan, and a dozen countries most Americans couldn't pronounce. The muscle memory of those experiences kept his eyes constantly moving, scanning the ridgelines, calculating angles of fire, noting every possible exit route. "Textbook," he muttered, adjusting his sunglasses. In the passenger seat, Jake Colson glanced over. At 28, the former Army Ranger was the youngest of the security detail and still prone to nervous energy before operations. "What's textbook?" "This entire stretch," Ray replied, his voice carrying the calm tone of a man who'd seen far worse than whatever might be waiting. "If I wanted to hit a convoy, this is exactly where I'd do it." Ray didn't look like anyone special. At 42, his cropped salt and pepper hair and weathered face could have belonged to any middle-aged contractor. The slight limp when he walked, courtesy of a Serbian sniper 9 years ago, only enhanced his unassuming appearance. Nothing about him suggested that he'd once been among the most elite combat drivers in U.S. Special Operations, a man who could handle anything from an up-armored Humvee to a stolen tank if the mission required it. His forearms, resting casually on the steering wheel, told a different story. Dense with corded muscle and marked with old scars, they belonged to someone who had fought his way out of situations that would have killed most soldiers. Through the windshield, the convoy's destination, Ciudad Obregón, remained hours away. The trucks carried specialized medical equipment worth millions: ventilators, cardiac monitors, surgical robots, and proprietary pharmaceuticals that would save countless lives once installed in the new hospital. Privately, Ray suspected that's why they'd been targeted, not just for the street value, but because someone wanted to control who lived or died in this region. "Checkpoint isn't on the itinerary," Jake said suddenly, pointing to flashing lights ahead, where the road curved around a massive rock formation. Ray slowed the lead truck, eyes narrowing. "Call it in." Jake keyed his radio. "Base, Convoy 1. We've got an unscheduled checkpoint at kilometer marker 115. Local police presence, 2 vehicles, requesting verification." The radio crackled with the voice of their operations manager back in Hermosillo. "Convoy 1, negative on authorized checkpoints for that area. Regional Command reports no scheduled police activity." Ray pressed the second button on his console, opening the encrypted channel to the other 3 trucks. "All units, we've got an unauthorized checkpoint ahead. Protocol Amber. Protocol Amber. Proceed with extreme caution. Be prepared to abort." The drivers of the other trucks acknowledged with clicks on their radios. "Options?" Jake asked, hand already moving toward. The gun secured under his seat. We approach slow, assess, prepare to execute a rolling reverse if necessary. Ray's voice remained casual, but his mind was already calculating angles, speeds, and the physics required to turn a 4-truck convoy in a coordinated 180-degree maneuver on a narrow mountain road. He keyed his radio again. Trucks, 2 through. 4. Tighten your intervals to 20 meters. Be prepared for my signal. The police checkpoint consisted of 2 patrol cars angled across the road, lights flashing, with 4 officers standing in the standard stop formation. To the average driver, they might have looked official in their dark blue uniforms, but Ray catalogued the subtle inconsistencies immediately. Mismatched equipment, boots that weren't standard issue, the way one man held his weapon with a comfort that came from regular use rather than occasional training. "Those aren't cops," he said quietly. "See the guy on the left? No real officer holds a rifle that way, and the patches are wrong. Too new on uniforms that worn." Jake's hand inched closer to his weapon. "Call it." Ray maintained their approach. Speed, but shifted his foot so it hovered between the brake and accelerator. He'd been in situations like this from Baghdad to Bogota, and the calculus was always the same. Evaluate the threat, identify the weakest point, and hit it with overwhelming force if retreat wasn't possible. As they slowed to 30 meters from the checkpoint, Ray noticed movement in his side mirror, a subtle shift of color against the rocky terrain. "We've got flankers," he said calmly. 3 o'clock, up on the ridge." "Shit," Jake muttered, spotting them too. "Cartel?" "Los Serpientes, most likely," Ray replied. "This fits their pattern. Fake checkpoint backed by shooters on high ground. They've been hitting secure shipments along this route for months. What the cartel didn't know was that today's convoy carried more than medical equipment. It carried men who'd spent their careers surviving situations precisely like this one." The lead officer raised his hand, signaling them to stop. Ray brought the truck to a halt exactly 25 meters from the checkpoint, just outside effective handgun range, but close enough to appear compliant. "Base, Convoy 1, Jake transmitted. "We're stopping at the checkpoint. I count 4 tangos in police uniforms, at least 3 more on the eastern ridge, requesting immediate support." The radio replied with their operations manager's tense voice. "Convoy 1, nearest QRF is 20 minutes out. State police have been notified, but estimate 30 minutes minimum." Translation: they were on their own for at least half an hour. Ray kept the engine running as the lead officer approached, hand resting casually on his sidearm. Through the open window, the midday heat rushed in like a physical force. "Documentos? Por favor," the man said, his accent too crisp for the local dialect. His eyes darted past Ray to scan the truck's interior with professional assessment. "Routine inspection." Ray produced the convoy's paperwork with his left hand, keeping his right within reach of his own weapon. "We're on a schedule, officer. Medical supplies for Ciudad Obregón." The man examined the papers, his expression betraying nothing. "There have been reports of stolen medical equipment. We need to inspect your cargo." It was a reasonable pretext, which made it all the more dangerous. Ray smiled with practiced ease. "Of course. But our manifest was cleared through federal customs this morning. Perhaps your command center wasn't updated." The slight narrowing of the man's eyes confirmed Ray's suspicion. This wasn't a shakedown or random stop. This was a coordinated operation with specific intelligence about their cargo. "Step out of the vehicle, please," the officer said, hand moving subtly closer to his weapon. Ray maintained his practiced smile. "I'd be happy to, But first, I should contact our security coordinator. Protocol, you understand. As Ray reached for the radio, giving the appearance of compliance, he pressed the emergency button twice, the signal for all drivers. In his mirror, he could see the other truck's engines starting to rev slightly, drivers preparing for rapid acceleration. The fake officer's patience evaporated. He drew his weapon with practiced speed. Out. Now. Ray raised his hands slowly, the universal gesture of compliance that had gotten him out of, and sometimes into, countless dangerous situations. No problem, officer. We're cooperating. As he unlatched his door, Ray executed the first move in what would become a cascade of precisely calculated actions. He swung the heavy armored door outward with explosive force, catching the man off guard and sending him stumbling backward. In the same fluid motion, Ray dropped the truck into gear and slammed the accelerator. "All units, go, go, go!" he shouted into the radio as their truck lurched forward, aiming for the narrow gap between the patrol cars. The fake officers reacted with professional speed, opening fire as the truck barreled toward them. Bullets pinged against the reinforced windshield, creating spiderweb patterns, but failing to penetrate the ballistic glass. "Shooters on the ridge!" Jake called out, returning fire through his window as Ray focused on driving. Ray hadn't survived 15 years in the world's most dangerous places by hesitating. He aimed the truck's reinforced bumper directly at the junction of the two patrol cars, hitting them with enough force to shove them apart like toys. Metal screamed against metal as the truck plowed through, creating a gap for the rest of the convoy to follow. In his mirror, Ray watched as Truck 2 followed their path, its driver expertly threading the widened gap. Trucks 3 and 4 were close behind, maintaining tight formation despite the chaos. "We're through!" Jake shouted over the radio. "Keep moving!" But Ray knew better. "Not yet," he said, eyes scanning the road ahead, where it curved around another rock formation. "This is just phase 1. No competent ambush relied on a single attack point. The checkpoint had been meant to stop them, yes, but also to channel them toward the real kill zone. As they rounded the bend, his suspicion was confirmed. 100 meters ahead, a jackknifed semi-truck blocked the road completely, its trailer angled to create an impassable barrier. On both sides of the road, armed men in tactical positions waited, weapons trained on the approaching convoy. "Main ambush, 12 o'clock, Ray transmitted calmly. "All units, prepare for Protocol Red. Protocol Red, maximum defensive driving, lethal force authorized." Jake looked at him, the question obvious even without words. How are we getting through that? Ray's response was to accelerate rather than brake, a move that went against every natural instinct when facing an obstacle. "Call Bryant and tell him to deploy countermeasures on my mark." Bryant Mason was in Truck 3, a former EOD specialist who'd brought his own particular skills to the security team. Specifically, his understanding of how to create controlled chaos when needed. The distance to the blockade closed rapidly. 500 meters, then 300. "They're expecting us to stop or turn around," Ray explained, hands steady on the wheel as they hurtled toward what looked like certain collision. "They'll have anti-vehicle measures in place on both shoulders, probably caltrops or spike strips. We go through, not around." "Through?" Jake repeated, eyes fixed on the seemingly impenetrable barrier ahead. "Through what?" "That semi isn't properly anchored," Ray replied. "Look at the angle. The driver panicked during setup, the tractor's wheels aren't blocked, and the kingpin connection is load-bearing but not locked down." It was the kind of detail only someone who'd spent years studying vehicle vulnerabilities would notice, and exactly why Delta Force had valued Ray's driving skills in places where mistakes meant death. "Bryant, stand by," Jake transmitted. 200 meters to contact. The waiting gunman had clearly expected the convoy to stop or attempt evasive maneuvers. The sight of the lead truck accelerating directly toward the blockade caused momentary confusion, precisely what Ray had counted on. "Now!" Ray ordered as they closed to 100 meters. Jake keyed his radio. "Bryant, deploy!" From truck 3, 2 objects sailed out the window, arcing through the air to land among the gunmen posted on either side of the road. A second later, thunderous noise and blinding light erupted as the flashbang grenades detonated, disorienting the ambushers. At the critical moment, Ray didn't flinch at the explosion. His focus remained absolute as he aimed the truck at the exact point where the semi-tractor connected to its trailer. Years of training had taught him that even the most intimidating vehicles had structural weaknesses if you knew where to look. "Brace!" he shouted as the truck's reinforced bumper crashed into the semi at precisely the spot where the fifth wheel coupler would be under maximum stress. The impact was bone-jarring, but Ray had calculated correctly. The kingpin coupling between the tractor and trailer sheared away under the concentrated force. The sudden separation caused the trailer to shift sideways while the tractor rolled forward, creating a gap just wide enough for their truck to force its way through. Metal screeched against metal as they pushed through the narrowing space. Sparks flew as the truck's armored sides scraped past the trailer, but Ray kept the acceleration steady, forcing their way through the collapsing gap. "We're clear!" Jake shouted as they burst through the other side, the trailer toppling completely behind them, creating an even wider path for the following trucks. In his mirror, Ray watched Truck 2 navigate through the opening, followed closely by Trucks 3 and 4. The ambushers, still recovering from the flashbangs, struggled to reorient themselves as their carefully planned trap disintegrated. "All units through the blockade," Ray transmitted. "Maintain speed and spacing. Be alert for secondary ambush points." The cartel would have a contingency plan, they always did. But for now, the convoy had the advantage of momentum and surprise. Ray kept their speed high as they continued down the mountain road, putting distance between themselves and the failed ambush. Jake was already reporting to base, requesting air support and coordination with legitimate Mexican authorities. Ray let him handle it, keeping his full attention on the road and their surroundings. The day was far from over. "That was some driving," Jake said when he finished the transmission, a new respect in his voice. Ray shrugged. "Just physics and observation. Most barriers aren't as solid as they look if you hit them correctly." What he didn't add was that he'd used the same technique to breach a Taliban checkpoint in Kandahar province 8 years earlier, saving a team of stranded operators when their extraction had gone sideways. Some skills never left you, no matter how long you'd been out of uniform. The radio crackled with their operations manager's voice. "Convoy 1, be advised, we're tracking multiple vehicles converging on your position from side roads. Satellite shows at least 3 pickup trucks with mounted weapons moving to intercept." "Copy that," Ray responded. "Time frame? Based on their speed and your current position, intercept in approximately 12 minutes. Ray checked their location. On the dash-mounted GPS, the road ahead followed a river valley for several kilometers before climbing back into more mountainous terrain. A straightaway in cartel country was never good news. It offered perfect conditions for the vehicles about to intercept them. "All units," he transmitted to the convoy. "We have pursuit incoming. Prepare for high-speed engagement." From Truck 4 came the steady voice of Maria Santos, former Army vehicle commander and the most experienced weapons specialist on the team. "Copy that. Gun systems online and ready." Unlike standard transport vehicles, their trucks had been specially modified by a private military contractor in Texas. Behind clever concealment panels, each vehicle carried defensive capabilities that would make most military units envious. Truck 4, in particular, had been outfitted with a remote-operated weapon system that Maria could control from inside the armored cabin. "We need to reach Checkpoint Delta before they catch us," Ray told Jake, referring to the safe zone they'd established 70 kilometers ahead, where a legitimate federal police unit waited. "Get Bryant to prepare a farewell gift for our friends." Jake relayed the request, while Ray focused on maintaining their speed through the winding road. In the distance, the valley opened up, revealing the straightaway he'd been concerned about. 2 kilometers of exposed road with minimal cover. "Bryant says he's got 3 packages ready," Jake reported. "Tell him to deploy on my mark once we hit the straightaway. Maria, when the packages go live, you're clear to engage any pursuit vehicles that make it through." Both team members acknowledged, and the convoy pressed on toward the open valley, each driver knowing their role in what was about to become a running battle. As they entered the straightaway, Ray could already see dust clouds in the distance. Behind them, the cartel vehicles moving to cut them off. He estimated they had maybe 2 minutes before intercept. "Bryant, deploy Package 1, he ordered when they reached the first kilometer marker. From Truck 3, a cylindrical object rolled onto the road behind them. To casual observation, it might have looked like nothing more than a piece of debris. But Bryant Mason had spent years in EOD developing specialized devices for exactly these scenarios. 30 seconds later, the first cartel truck hit the device. What appeared to be a simple road hazard was actually a sophisticated directional EMP device designed to fry electronic systems without causing catastrophic vehicle failure. The lead pursuit vehicle didn't explode dramatically, it simply died, coasting to a stop as every electronic system from engine control to communications went dark simultaneously. "One down," Bryant's satisfied voice came over the radio. 2 more incoming, moving to flank position. The remaining cartel vehicles had learned from their companion's fate. They split up, one taking the shoulder to the left of the road, the other moving right, both trying to overtake the convoy from the sides. "Maria, we're going to have company on the flanks," Ray transmitted. "You're cleared to engage when they present a clear threat." "Copy that," came her calm reply. "I have visual on both targets." Ray watched in his mirrors as the cartel vehicles accelerated, trying to pull alongside the convoy. Each was a modified pickup truck with a mounted heavy machine gun in the bed, standard cartel combat vehicles that had proven devastatingly effective against most opposition. "Bryant, deploy Package 2, right shoulder," Ray ordered as they passed the halfway point of the straightaway. Another device tumbled from Truck 3, this one bouncing onto the right shoulder of the road. When the pursuing truck on that side passed over it, the result was more visibly dramatic. The device erupted in a spray of specialized polymer that expanded instantly on contact with air, enveloping the vehicle's undercarriage and wheels. The truck swerved wildly as its tires became encased in the rapidly hardening substance, then flipped as the driver lost control at high speed. 2 down, Bryant reported. 1 still in pursuit. left side, closing fast. The final cartel vehicle had learned from its companion's mistakes. It maintained a safe distance from the convoy while accelerating to match their speed, its gunner preparing to open fire from beyond the effective range of most conventional weapons. "They're setting up for a long-range engagement," Maria observed. "50 caliber mounted gun. Experienced operator based on his positioning." Ray made a split-second decision based on years of combat experience. "Bryant, final package deploy now. Maria, be ready for immediate follow-up." The last of Bryant's special devices sailed from Truck 3, but unlike the previous two, this one didn't land in the pursuit vehicle's path. Instead, it detonated in midair, releasing a dense cloud of smoke that obscured the road between the convoy and their pursuer. The cartel vehicle hesitated momentarily, its driver unable to see through the expanding cloud. It was exactly the moment of indecision Ray had anticipated. Maria now. From concealed panels on Truck 4's roof, a compact remote weapon system emerged, controlled by Maria from within the armored cabin. Unlike the cartel's conspicuous mounted gun, this system was designed for precision rather than intimidation. Through the targeting system linked to her control panel, Maria tracked the cartel vehicle as it emerged from the smoke cloud. Her first burst struck the engine block with pinpoint accuracy, disabling the vehicle without hitting the fuel tank or ammunition that might cause a catastrophic explosion. Her second burst targeted the mounted weapon specifically, rendering it useless, before the gunner could bring it to bear on the convoy. The cartel truck swerved off the road, smoke pouring from its disabled engine. "Target neutralized," Maria reported calmly. "Weapon system secured." Ray allowed himself a moment of satisfaction as they reached the end of the straightaway and turned back into more defensible terrain. "All units, good work. Maintain current speed and formation. We're 30 minutes from checkpoint Delta." Jake was already updating their operations center, requesting satellite confirmation that no additional pursuit vehicles were inbound. Ray kept his focus on the road ahead, his mind already planning for the next potential threat. The convoy had survived the initial ambush and follow-up pursuit, but Ray knew better than to celebrate prematurely. Los Serpientes controlled this territory, and they wouldn't take this defeat lightly. The cartel's resources were vast, and their intelligence network extended throughout the region. By now, they would be mobilizing everything at their disposal to intercept the convoy before it reached safety. What they didn't realize was that Ray Mendoza had spent 15 years outrunning and outthinking opponents with far more resources and training than any cartel. From the mountains of Afghanistan to the deserts of Syria, he developed a particular set of skills that made him uniquely qualified for situations exactly like this one. The real question wasn't whether Los Serpientes would try again. It was whether they'd finally understand what kind of man they were up against before it was too late. As the convoy wound deeper into the mountains, Ray's satellite phone vibrated with an incoming call, the direct line that only 3 people in the world had access to. He glanced at the display, recognizing the encrypted number immediately. "This is about to get more complicated," he told Jake, before answering the call that would transform what had begun as a cartel ambush into something far more significant. The satellite phone conversation lasted less than 30 seconds, but it transformed Ray's understanding of their situation entirely. "Understood. We'll make the rendezvous," he said before ending the call. Jake looked at him expectantly. "Bad news?" "Depends on your perspective." Ray replied, his eyes returning to the road as the convoy continued its path through the mountain terrain. That was Langley. Our medical equipment isn't just medical equipment. Jake's posture stiffened. CIA involvement? We weren't briefed on that. Need to know, Ray said simply. And now we need to know. The ventilators contain embedded surveillance systems designed to monitor cartel communications. The surgical equipment has specialized components that can intercept and decode encrypted transmissions within a 3-kilometer radius. That explains the heat we're taking, Jake muttered. This isn't about street value, it's about operational security. Ray nodded. Los Serpientes must have intelligence sources inside the manufacturer. They can't allow this equipment to reach Ciudad Obregón. If it does, their entire communication network becomes compromised. He keyed the radio, switching to the secure command channel. All units, situation update. Our cargo has been designated Priority Alpha. We have new orders to divert to secondary extraction point for immediate airlift. The secondary extraction point was an abandoned airstrip 70 kilometers east, further from their original destination, but potentially safer than continuing on their planned route, where the cartel would have prepared additional ambush points. Copy that, came the responses from the other trucks, their drivers accepting the change without question. They'd all served in enough classified operations to understand that mission parameters sometimes shifted without explanation. Ray adjusted their course at the next junction, taking a narrower road that climbed higher into the mountains. The terrain here was rougher, the road less maintained, but it offered better defensive positions and fewer potential ambush sites. How long before they figure out our change in direction? Jake asked, checking their ammunition and readying communications. Equipment for what they both knew would be coming. Not long, Ray replied, eyes constantly scanning the road ahead and the ridgelines above. Los Serpientes owns these mountains. They'll have observation posts watching major intersections. He wasn't wrong. Less than 15 minutes after their course change, the radio crackled with Maria's voice from Truck 4. We've got movement on the ridge at 2 o'clock. Vehicle dust trails. At least 3 trucks moving parallel to our position. They're tracking us, Bryant added from Truck 3. Probably using the high ground to coordinate. Ray had anticipated this. In his years with Delta, he'd learned that controlling the high ground was always preferable, but using it effectively required coordination. The cartel would need time to position their forces to cut off the convoys. New route. We use that delay, Ray transmitted to the team. Maria, what's our satellite coverage showing? Maria, whose role in the convoy included managing their real-time intelligence assets, accessed the secure terminal in Truck 4. Thermal imaging shows activity at what appears to be a small village 5 kilometers ahead. Multiple heat signatures, vehicle movements consistent with a staging area. Ray processed this information quickly. They're setting up a blockade at the village, probably pulling in assets from other areas to cut us off. Options? Asked Sam Wilson, the driver of Truck 2 and former Marine Force recon. We could turn back, find another route, Jake suggested. Ray shook his head. No, every minute we spend in these mountains gives them time to mobilize more forces. We push through while they're still organizing. It was classic Ray Mendoza thinking. When, faced with an enemy trying to set a trap, move faster than they can complete their preparations. Hit them while they're still planning, when coordination is minimal and confusion maximal. Bryant, what countermeasures do we have left? Ray asked. 2 smoke dispensers, 1 EMP device, and 3 frag grenades, Bryant replied. plus whatever personal weapons each truck is carrying. Ray formulated a plan, drawing on tactics he'd used in similar situations in Afghanistan's Hindu Kush mountains. We'll approach fast, deploy smoke to cover our advance, then hit them before they can establish a proper blockade. Maria, use the satellite feed to identify the command vehicle. That's your primary target. What about civilians? Jake asked, concern evident in his voice. Even former special operators maintained strict rules of engagement when it came to non-combatants. Thermal imaging shows the civilian structures are on the eastern edge of the village, Maria reported. The cartel forces are concentrated on the western approach, our route. We avoid the eastern section completely, Ray ordered. No engagement with the civilian area under any circumstances, the team acknowledged, and Ray increased their speed as they approached the village. The road began to descend slightly, offering better visibility of what lay ahead. What had once been a small farming community now appeared largely abandoned, with only a few buildings showing signs of occupation. The main road passed through the center, with a church and plaza forming, the heart of the settlement. Through his binoculars, Ray could see the cartel's hasty preparations. They had positioned 2 pickup trucks across the road at the village entrance, while armed men took up positions behind walls and in doorways. They were still moving into place exactly the state of disorganization Ray had hoped to find. All units, prepare for contact, he transmitted. Bryant, deploy smoke on my mark. Maria, as soon as you have a clear shot at the command vehicle, take it. All other units, maintain tight formation and follow my lead. The convoy was now only 1 kilometer from the village entrance. Ray could see figures scrambling to complete their blockade, the cartel forces clearly surprised by how quickly their quarry had arrived. 3, 2, 1, mark, Ray called. Bryant deployed the smoke dispensers from truck 3, sending thick white clouds billowing across the road ahead. The effect was immediate, confusion among the cartel forces as their visibility dropped to near zero. Ray didn't hesitate. He accelerated the lead truck directly into the smoke cloud, trusting his instincts and memory of what lay beyond. The other trucks followed close behind, maintaining tight formation despite the blinding conditions. As they burst through the smoke into the village entrance, the cartel forces opened fire, but their shots were hasty and uncoordinated. Ray aimed directly for the narrow gap between the 2 blockade vehicles, threading the needle with precision that came from years of high-pressure driving. Command vehicle identified, Maria called out. Black SUV with communications array behind the church. Ray swerved to create a clear line of fire for truck 4. Take the shot! Maria's precision fire struck the command vehicle's antenna array and engine block. Without communications and mobility, the cartel's coordination would collapse quickly. The convoy pushed deeper into the village, the other trucks following Ray's exact path. Cartel gunmen continued firing from positions on both sides, but the convoy's armor was holding. Jake returned suppressive fire from the passenger seat, while Ray focused entirely on navigation, weaving through the narrow streets at speeds that would have been suicidal for a less experienced driver. Bryant, EMP at the plaza intersection, Ray ordered as they approached the village center, where satellite imagery had shown another group of cartel vehicles attempting to form a secondary blockade. The EMP device detonated just as the convoy reached the plaza, disabling the electronic systems of the vehicles still trying to get into position. The cartel gunmen found themselves with stalled engines and dead radios at the critical moment. Ray didn't slow down. He barreled through the plaza, past the disabled vehicles, and onto the exit road leading east out of the village. The other, Trucks followed in perfect formation, maintaining the momentum that had carried them through the enemy position before a proper defense could be established. "All units, report status," Ray called once they were clear of the village. "Truck 2, operational, minor damage to rear quarter panel," Sam reported. "Truck 3, fully operational," came Bryant's response. "Truck 4, operational. 2 impact sites on windshield but glass holding," Maria added. Ray allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. They had broken through the hastily assembled blockade with minimal damage, but he knew better than to celebrate prematurely. The cartel would regroup quickly, and their next attempt would be better coordinated. "Maria, what's the satellite showing behind us?" he asked. "Multiple vehicles organizing pursuit," she confirmed. "I count at least 8 technical vehicles mobilizing from the village. ETA to intercept at our current speed, approximately 18 minutes. Ray considered their options. The road ahead would eventually descend into a river valley before climbing back into the mountains where the secondary extraction point awaited. The valley would be the most dangerous section, open terrain with limited cover and multiple approach vectors for pursuers. "We need to reach the valley bridge before they catch up," he decided. "Once we're across, we can disable it to delay pursuit." The bridge in question was a narrow concrete span across a deep river gorge, the only viable crossing point for vehicles for 30 kilometers in either direction. If they could deny the cartel use of that bridge, they would buy critical time. To reach the extraction point, "Bryant, do you have enough explosives to take down a bridge?" Ray asked. "Not to completely destroy it," Bryant admitted. "But I can compromise the structure enough to make it impassable to vehicles." "Good enough," Ray replied. "Jake, contact our exfil team. Tell them we're proceeding to the extraction point with pursuit. Request immediate air support if available." Jake made the call while Ray pushed the convoy to its maximum safe speed on the winding mountain road. Every curve required perfect judgment. Too slow, and they'd lose precious time. Too fast, and they risked a catastrophic accident on the treacherous terrain. "Exfil team confirms receipt," Jake reported after ending the call. "They're spinning up now. ETA to extraction point after we reach them. 15 minutes. Air support is complicated." Ray understood the subtext. Complications, in this context, meant political sensitivities about U.S. military aircraft operating in Mexican airspace. Even for a CIA operation, the diplomatic considerations were significant. "We make do with what we have," he said simply, a philosophy that had kept him alive through countless missions where support was limited or non-existent. The convoy continued its rapid descent toward the valley floor. As they rounded a curve, the bridge came into view in the distance, a thin concrete line spanning a steep gorge, with the river visible as a silver thread far below. "Maria, status on pursuit?" Ray asked. "Closing faster than expected," she reported, tension evident in her voice. "Revised intercept projection, 8 minutes. They must have found a shortcut through the terrain." Ray processed this information quickly. "They know these mountains better than we do. Local knowledge is giving them the advantage." The situation was deteriorating. They needed to reach the bridge with enough lead time for Bryant to set his charges, but the gap was narrowing too quickly. "New plan," Ray decided. "We split the convoy." This was a risky strategy, but one that Ray had employed successfully during a particularly challenging extraction in Yemen years earlier. By dividing their forces, they could divide the cartel's attention and resources. Trucks 1 and 3 will continue to the extraction point, he explained. Trucks 2 and 4 will create a diversion at the bridge to delay pursuit. Once the diversion is complete, they'll take the Eastern Mountain Trail to rejoin us. It wasn't ideal. The Eastern Trail was barely wide enough for their vehicles and would significantly slow down the second group's progress. But it would allow them to avoid the main pursuit force while still eventually reaching the extraction point. Sam, Maria, are you comfortable with this? Ray asked, giving his teammates the opportunity to voice concerns. Affirmative, Sam replied. From truck 2, we've got this. Understood and agreed, Maria added from truck 4. Just leave some cartel for us to deal with. Ray allowed himself a small smile at Maria's characteristic confidence. Bryant, transfer your remaining explosives to truck 2 at the bridge. Jake and I will continue with the primary cargo. The plan set, the convoy maintained its rapid pace toward the bridge. When they finally reached it, Ray pulled to a quick stop, allowing Bryant to transfer his demolition equipment to Sam and Maria. The exchange took less than 40 seconds, efficiency born from years of joint operations. Good hunting, Ray told them as trucks 2 and 4 moved into defensive positions at the bridge approach. See you at the extraction point. Count on it, Sam replied, already preparing for the coming engagement. Ray and Bryant accelerated away, crossing the bridge and continuing along the main road toward the extraction point. In his mirror, Ray watched as their teammates prepared for the cartel's arrival, setting up the precision ambush that would give the primary cargo the time it needed to reach safety. The 2 remaining trucks pushed hard along the mountain road, each kilometer taking them closer to the abandoned airstrip where extraction awaited. But Ray's mind remained partly with the teammates they'd left behind, visualizing the scenario unfolding at the bridge. They'll be fine, Bryant said, as if reading his thoughts. Sam and Maria are the best at what they do. Ray nodded. I know, but leaving teammates never gets easier, no matter how many times you do it. Bryant understood. They'd both made similar decisions throughout their careers, the necessary tactical compromises that sometimes required splitting forces in hostile territory. Our primary mission is the cargo, Bryant reminded him. The equipment in these trucks needs to reach American hands. Ray refocused on the road ahead, calculating distances and timing in his head. We're 22 minutes from the extraction point. If Sam and Maria delay pursuit by 15 minutes and then take the Eastern Trail, they should arrive within 10 minutes of us. It was a tight window, but possible with operators of their caliber. The question was whether the extraction team would wait for all 4 trucks or prioritize the cargo in the first 2. Jake, re-establish contact with exfil, Ray instructed. Make it clear that we expect to arrive in 4 vehicles, not 2. Extraction isn't complete until all personnel are accounted for. Jake made the call, relaying Ray's exact words to the extraction team. The response, when it came, was less than reassuring. They say their primary directive is to secure the cargo, Jake reported after ending the call. They'll attempt to accommodate all personnel, but make no guarantees beyond the minimum necessary to secure the primary objective. Ray's jaw tightened. It was the kind of bureaucratic half-commitment he'd encountered too many times during his career. Mission planners who saw operators as expendable assets rather than irreplaceable teammates. That's not happening, he said flatly. We all go home, or none of the cargo does. It wasn't an idle threat. Ray had made similar stands before, including once in northern Iraq, when an intelligence officer had suggested leaving a wounded team member behind to expedite extraction. That officer had quickly learned why Ray's reputation for loyalty was as legendary as his driving skills. "I'll make that exceptionally clear to them," Jake replied with a grim smile, already redialing the extraction team. As they continued toward the rendezvous, Ray monitored both the road ahead and their comms, waiting for word from the bridge. The initial timeline for pursuit intercept had passed, which meant Sam and Maria must have successfully engaged the cartel forces. But without direct communication, maintained to minimize electronic signatures that could be tracked, they had no way of knowing the specific outcome. The mountain road began to level out as they approached a high plateau. According to their maps, the abandoned airstrip was located on this plateau, a relic from the 1940s when small aircraft had serviced the remote mining operations in the region. 2 minutes to visual on the extraction point, Bryant reported, checking their GPS coordinates against the physical landmarks. Ray adjusted their speed slightly, wanting to approach with caution rather than haste. Any extraction point could potentially be compromised, especially when dealing with an adversary as well connected as Los Serpientes. "Standard security approach," he instructed. "We hold at observation distance until we confirm friendly presence." As they crested the final rise, the airstrip came into view, a straight strip of cracked concrete cutting across the plateau, bordered by the skeletal remains of several small buildings. A transport helicopter was already on the ground, its rotors turning slowly in standby mode. Several armed figures secured the perimeter, their tactical movements clearly indicating professional training. "Looks like our ride," Bryant observed. "I count 8 personnel, standard protective formation around the aircraft." Ray studied the scene carefully, looking for anything out of place. His years in special operations had taught him that the most dangerous moments often came during extraction, when tension decreased and vigilance could lapse. "Approach with caution," he instructed. "Standard challenge and password protocols. Be ready to abort if anything feels wrong." They advanced slowly toward the airstrip, maintaining distance until proper identification could be established. Jake made radio contact with the extraction team, exchanging the authentication codes that would confirm they were dealing with friendlies. "Challenge authenticated," Jake reported after completing the exchange. "They're our people." Ray still proceeded cautiously, bringing their vehicles to a stop 50 meters from the helicopter. One of the armed figures approached, a solidly built man whose bearing immediately identified him as the team leader. "Mendoza," the man called out. "I'm Carson, extraction lead. We need to move quickly." Ray stepped from the truck, keeping one hand near his sidearm as a precaution. "We have 2 more vehicles inbound. The extraction isn't complete until they arrive." Carson frowned. "My orders are to prioritize the cargo. We have a limited window for departure before we risk compromising the operation." "Your orders have changed," Ray replied, his tone making it clear this wasn't a point for negotiation. "We wait for all personnel." Before Carson could respond, Bryant emerged from Truck 3, carrying what appeared to be a small electronic device. "Insurance policy," he explained, holding up the device so Carson could see the blinking light. "This is connected to the cargo's transport cases. If it loses my heartbeat signal for any reason, the specialized components self-destruct, completely unrecoverable." Carson's expression shifted from frustration to calculation. "That wasn't in the mission brief." "Need to know," Ray replied, using the same phrase that had been used on them earlier. "And now you know. We wait for our people." The standoff lasted only moments before Carson relented. "Fine, but we're on a clock here. If your people aren't here in 15 minutes, we have to make hard choices. Ray's satellite phone vibrated with an incoming message. He checked the display to find coordinates and a brief text. Alternate approach, ETA 12 min. They'll be here, Ray confirmed. Sam and Maria are taking an alternate route to avoid pursuit. 12 minutes out. Carson nodded reluctantly and returned to the helicopter to update his team. Ray and Bryant supervised the careful transfer of their cargo to the aircraft, ensuring each case was handled properly and secured according to protocol. Any word on what happened at the bridge? Bryant asked quietly as they worked. Ray shook his head. Nothing specific, but they're alive and mobile, which means they did their job. The minutes passed with agonizing slowness as they waited for their teammates. Ray positioned himself where he could watch both the helicopter and the various approach routes to the airstrip, his experienced eyes constantly scanning for any sign of movement. Finally, at the 11-minute mark, dust clouds appeared on the eastern horizon. Two vehicles moving at high speed across the plateau, taking a route that bypassed the main road entirely. There, Ray pointed, that's them. Carson moved to his side, raising binoculars to confirm. You sure those are your people and not pursuit? Positive, Ray replied. That's Maria's driving pattern. Tight following distance, staggered positioning. For maximum coverage, Cartel vehicles would be spread out to maximize firing angles. As the vehicles drew closer, Ray could see that they hadn't escaped unscathed. Truck 4 showed significant damage to its rear quarter, and Truck 2 had multiple impact sites across its armored body. But they were moving under their own power and maintaining good speed, all that mattered in the final approach to extraction. Sam and Maria brought their vehicles to a controlled stop beside the helicopter, both emerging with weapons ready, a habit ingrained by years of operations where extraction points could become ambush sites. Status, Ray asked as they approached. Mission accomplished, Sam reported, a streak of blood visible on his temple from what appeared to be a grazing wound. Bridge is impassable. We estimate pursuit has been delayed by at least 40 minutes while they find an alternate crossing. Casualties? Ray inquired, noting how Maria favored her left arm slightly. Nothing serious, she replied, following his gaze to her arm. Caught some glass when a round penetrated the side window. Sam got grazed during the initial exchange. Both fully operational, Carson interrupted their reunion. If everyone's mobile, we need to move now. Load up and prepare for immediate departure. The team complied, securing their equipment and boarding the helicopter with practiced efficiency. Within minutes, they were airborne, the plateau falling away beneath them as they gained altitude and set course for the US border. Only when they were safely at cruising altitude did Ray allow himself to relax slightly, looking around at his team, bruised and bloodied, but alive and intact. They had accomplished their mission against significant odds, just as they had done countless times before in official capacities around the world. So, Maria said, breaking the silence as she finished bandaging her arm. Anyone going to tell us what was so special about this cargo that the cartel was willing to commit so many resources to intercept it? Ray exchanged glances with Jake and Bryant, considering how much to reveal given the classified nature of the equipment. Finally, he decided his team deserved the truth after what they'd been through. The medical equipment contains advanced surveillance, a technology, he explained. Once installed at the hospital in Ciudad Obregón, it would give U.S. intelligence unprecedented access to cartel communications and movements in the region. Sam whistled softly. No wonder they threw everything they had at us. We were carrying the key to their entire operation. And they never saw it coming, Maria added with a hint of satisfaction. A seemingly innocent medical shipment that would have compromised their entire network. Ray nodded. Los Serpientes has been evolving their tactics, becoming more sophisticated. In their operations, this technology was designed specifically to counter that evolution, to get ahead of their adaptations. The helicopter continued its journey toward the border, the team falling into companionable silence as they processed the day's events. For Ray, it had been a vivid reminder of his former life. The high-stakes operations, split-second decisions, and absolute trust in teammates that had defined his career in Delta Force. Carson approached from the cockpit area, taking the seat across from Ray. "Langley's pleased," he said simply. "The cargo's intact, and Los Serpientes took significant losses today. Their operational capability in the region will be compromised for months." "And the medical equipment?" Ray asked. "Will it still reach the hospital?" Carson nodded. "A separate shipment of actual medical equipment is already en route through official channels. This was always about getting the surveillance technology into place, not the medical facade." Ray accepted this with a nod, though it left him with mixed feelings. He understood the necessity of the deception, but couldn't help thinking about the legitimate medical needs of the region. Needs that had become a convenient cover for intelligence operations. As the helicopter crossed into U.S. airspace, Ray looked out at the landscape below, the invisible border that separated nations but did little to separate the complex realities of the ongoing cartel conflict. Today, they had won a significant victory, but the war would continue, a shadowy contest of resources, intelligence, and willpower. What Los Serpientes had learned today was that sometimes the most dangerous adversaries weren't the obvious ones. Sometimes they were the unassuming driver with 15 years of Delta Force experience and a team of specialists who knew exactly how to turn a cartel ambush into a lesson they would never forget. The helicopter touched down at a private airfield just north of the US-Mexico border, its rotors slowly winding down as medical personnel rushed forward to assess the team's injuries. Ray stepped out last, his eyes scanning the perimeter with habitual vigilance despite being on friendly soil. Old habits died hard, especially those that had kept him alive through 15 years of covert operations. "Mr. Mendoza," a voice called from beside a black SUV parked near the hangar. "A word, please." The speaker was a trim man in his 50s, dressed in the unremarkable suit that screamed government agency to anyone who knew the signs. Ray recognized him immediately as Daniel Hargrove, CIA Special Activities Division, the man who had recruited Ray for this particular assignment after his retirement from Delta. "Go get checked out," Ray told his team. "I'll handle the debrief." As his teammates were escorted to the medical station, Ray approached Hargrove with measured steps, his body still humming with residual adrenaline from the mission. "Quite a show you put on down there," Hargrove said, opening the SUV's rear door. "The satellite footage is already being studied at Langley. Your driving techniques are impressive." Ray slid into the vehicle, noting the soundproof partition that separated them from the driver. "You didn't mention this was a CIA operation when you hired us. Would it have changed your acceptance?" Hargrove asked, his tone suggesting he already knew the answer. "No," Ray admitted, "but my team deserved to know the real risks. Los Serpientes hit us with everything they had because they knew exactly what was in those trucks. Hargrove nodded, his expression giving away nothing. A security breach at the manufacturer has been identified and addressed. But that's not why I wanted to speak with you privately. He removed a tablet from his briefcase and pulled up a series of images, surveillance photos showing a compound nestled in the mountains, heavily guarded and isolated. 3 days ago, our intelligence assets identified this location as the new headquarters of Alejandro Vega, the current leader of Los Serpientes. The surveillance equipment you just delivered was only phase 1 of a larger operation. Ray studied the photographs with professional interest, noting defensive positions, access routes, and potential vulnerabilities. This isn't a standard cartel compound. The security layout looks military. It should, Hargrove confirmed. Vega has been recruiting ex-Special Forces operators, primarily from Mexico's GAFE units, but also mercenaries from various South American countries. He's transforming Los Serpientes from a traditional cartel into something more akin to a paramilitary organization. Ray could see the implications immediately. Cartels had always been dangerous, but their tactics were typically straightforward: overwhelming force, brutality, and corruption. A cartel led by properly trained military operators would present an entirely different level of threat. The surveillance equipment was meant to gather intelligence on this compound? Ray asked. Correct. But after today's events, Vega will know his communications are compromised. He'll change protocols, relocate key personnel, possibly abandon the compound entirely. We need to move faster than anticipated. Ray already sensed where this conversation was heading. I'm retired, Hargrove. Today was a one-time contract job. The CIA man smiled thinly. A job you handled with remarkable efficiency. Your team demonstrated capabilities that would require months to replicate with other assets, time we don't have. What exactly are you proposing? Hargrove scrolled to another image. A man in his early 40s with sharp features and calculating eyes, dressed in tactical gear while inspecting a weapons cache. Alejandro Vega, former Mexican Special Forces commander, trained at Fort Benning alongside many of our best operators. He's not just another cartel leader, he's potentially the most dangerous narco-terrorist we've faced. His vision goes beyond drug trafficking to creating a power base that could destabilize the entire region. Ray had heard rumors about such figures emerging in the cartel world. Men with military training who brought professional discipline and strategic thinking to organizations previously run on intimidation and street tactics. And you want me to what? Assassinate him? That's not what I do. No. Hargrove shook his head. We want you to extract him. The statement hung in the air between them. Extraction was different from elimination, more complicated, more dangerous, and requiring a specialized skill set that few operators possessed. It was also, not coincidentally, exactly what Ray had specialized in during his time with Delta Force. There's a diplomatic situation developing, Hargrove continued. Vega has leverage over several high-ranking Mexican officials. If he's simply killed, certain sensitive information gets released, creating an international incident that would severely damage U.S.-Mexico relations. So you need him alive and talking, Ray concluded. Precisely. Extracted to a secure facility where he can be properly debriefed without his dead man switches being triggered. Ray leaned back in the seat, considering the implications. You're talking about a cross-border snatch operation against a heavily guarded target who's expecting trouble. That would require a full Delta team with air support, surveillance, and multiple contingencies. Which is why we're prepared to authorize exactly those resources under your command. Now, Ray understood Hargrove's angle. The CIA needed a deniable operation with military precision, but without official military involvement. A private contractor, leading a hand-picked team, would provide exactly that. All the capability with none of the political blowback if things went sideways. My people just survived a major engagement. They need recovery time. We're prepared to supplement your team with additional operators of your choosing, Hargrove countered. Former colleagues you trust, people with the specific skill sets this mission requires. Ray fell silent, weighing the proposal. He'd left Delta Force specifically to avoid these high-risk, politically sensitive operations. The constant deployment, the stress, the impossible situations, they had taken their toll after 15 years. He'd promised himself that his private security work would be straightforward, defensive rather than offensive. But Hargrove was offering him command authority over an operation that would have significant impact. The chance to select his own team, plan his own mission parameters, and utilize resources usually reserved for official military operations. It was a level of operational control he'd rarely been granted, even in his final years with Delta. I'd need complete operational autonomy, Ray said finally. My plan, my timeline, my rules of engagement. Hargrove nodded. Within certain parameters, yes. The target must be taken alive and the footprint must remain deniable. And my team from today, they're included only if they volunteer after full briefing on the actual mission parameters. No more need-to-know half-truths. Agreed. Ray studied Hargrove's face, looking for signs of deception or reservation. Finding none, he continued, I'll need 48 hours for planning and team assembly before I give you a final answer. You have 24, Hargrove countered. Vega is already moving key personnel. The window is closing. Ray knew this was non-negotiable. In the intelligence world, timing was everything. Opportunities emerged and disappeared with frightening speed. 24 hours then, he agreed. And I'll need complete intelligence files on Vega, his compound, security patterns, and personnel. You'll have everything we've got, Hargrove assured him, handing over a secure satellite phone. This is your direct line to me. Once you've reviewed the files and consulted with your team, call with your decision. As Ray stepped out of the vehicle, Hargrove added one final comment. For what it's worth, Mendoza, there aren't 5 people in the world who could have done what you did. Today, that convoy should have been destroyed 3 times over. Your country needs those skills again, perhaps now more than ever. Ray didn't respond to the flattery. Instead, he watched the SUV pull away before turning toward the medical facility where his team was being treated. The simple security contract they'd signed up for had just evolved into something far more complex, and he needed to know if they were willing to follow him into it. Inside the medical facility, a military doctor was finishing up with Maria's arm, while Sam received stitches for his head wound. Bryant and Jake were already cleared, sitting together, reviewing after-action reports on tablets. How bad is it? Ray asked the doctor, nodding toward Maria's injury. Superficial lacerations from glass fragments, the doctor replied. No muscle or tendon damage. She'll have full mobility within 48. Dawn broke over the private airfield with the precision of a tactical operation. Ray had slept exactly 4 hours, a discipline honed during years of combat deployments, when rest was as critical as ammunition, but often just as limited. He stood on the tarmac watching as two Black Hawk helicopters touched down, their distinctive profiles silhouetted against the rising sun. The additional specialists they'd requested had arrived throughout the night, each bringing unique skills that would be essential for the coming mission. Dr. Thomas Chen had been first, arriving with cases of specialized medical equipment designed for battlefield trauma care. Marcus Washington followed shortly after, already setting up a communications hub in one of the hangar's side offices. Alexis Reyes and Jamie Winters had arrived together in the early morning hours, both immediately diving into mission preparation without complaint about the abbreviated timeline. Now the final pieces were falling into place as the helicopters delivered the tactical equipment Hargrove had promised. Ray approached as the crew began unloading, his experienced eye cataloging each item against his mental checklist. "All here?" Jake asked, joining him on the tarmac. "Looks like it," Ray confirmed. Hargrove delivered exactly what we requested. The equipment was impressive, cutting-edge tactical gear that would normally be reserved for official military operations. Night vision systems, communications packages, specialized breaching equipment, and weapons that weren't available on the commercial market. For a CIA operation being conducted through private contractors, no expense had been spared. "Team briefing in 20 minutes, Ray told Jake. "Make sure everyone's there, including our new additions." Jake nodded and moved off to notify the others, while Ray supervised the equipment transfer to their designated planning area. By the time everything was in place, the expanded team had assembled in the hangar's conference room, a diverse group of specialists united by their elite backgrounds and the common language of professional operators. Ray stood at the front, studying each face briefly. His core team from the Convoy mission, Jake, Bryant, Sam, and Maria, now joined by the specialists they'd specifically requested. 10 operators in total, each bringing capabilities that would be critical for success. "Thank you all for coming. On such short notice," Ray began, activating the digital display behind him. "What I'm about to brief you on is classified at the highest levels. The mission parameters are unusual, the timeline is compressed, and the stakes are significant." He outlined the situation concisely. Vega's background, the compound's defenses, the intelligence gathered on security patterns, and most importantly, the political complications that made this extraction particularly sensitive. "Our mission is clear," Ray continued, displaying satellite imagery of the target compound. "Extract Alejandro Vega alive and transport him to a designated secure facility for debriefing. The operation must appear unconnected to U.S. government. Activities and collateral damage must be minimized to avoid international complications." Marcus Washington, the former NSA communications specialist, raised a hand. "Timeline: insertion at 1400 hours today to coincide with scheduled resupply. Estimated time on target, 30 minutes maximum. Extraction no later than 1500 hours. Jamie Winters, the structural specialist, studied the compound layout with professional interest. Building construction. Primary structure is reinforced concrete with interior walls, likely standard construction, Ray replied, switching to architectural overlays. "Your initial assessment matches our intelligence. Load-bearing elements here, here, and here. Potential breach points identified at these locations." Alexis Reyes, whose experience with Mexican terrain and cartel tactics would be invaluable, pointed to the approaching roads. "Local security beyond the compound? Intelligence indicates. Observation posts here and here," Ray indicated on the map. Road checkpoints approximately 7 kilometers in each direction. Regular patrols along these routes, with response times estimated at 15 to 20 minutes from first alert. Dr. Chen examined the medical aspects with a surgeon's precision. Targets, physical condition, any medical considerations for extraction. Vega is 42, physically fit, no known medical conditions that would complicate transport, Ray answered. However, we must assume potential resistance during extraction, possibly requiring sedation. The briefing continued with this precise professionalism, each specialist asking questions specific to their area of expertise, Ray providing detailed answers based on available intelligence. The team was building a composite understanding of the operational environment essential for the coordinated execution that would be required. After the initial briefing, Ray outlined the insertion plan they had developed overnight. We'll split into 3 elements, he explained, indicating positions on the compound schematic. Alpha team will consist of myself, Jake, and Alexis. We'll insert via the scheduled resupply helicopter, neutralize the receiving party without raising alarms, then proceed to the main building to secure Vega. He pointed to the second insertion point. Bravo team, Sam, Maria, and Dr. Chen will insert via fast rope from the second helicopter once Alpha team confirms the helipad is secure. You'll establish a defensive perimeter around the main building and prepare for immediate medical support if needed. Finally, he indicated the compound perimeter. Charlie team, Bryant, Marcus, and Jamie will deploy to this ridgeline overlooking the compound. You'll provide overwatch, signals intelligence, and be prepared to create a coordinated diversion if our primary extraction route is compromised. Ray turned to Winters specifically. Jamie, you'll also prepare contingency breach points around the perimeter in case we need an alternate extraction route. Each team member nodded their understanding, already mentally rehearsing their specific roles and responsibilities. Questions on the overall concept? Ray asked, scanning the faces around him. Contingency if Vega isn't on site, Maria asked, always thinking ahead to potential complications. Intelligence confirms morning security briefing at 800 hours, which Vega attended personally, Ray replied. Satellite imagery shows no departures since then, but if he's not present, we abort, extract, and reassess. Rules of engagement, Sam inquired, the former Force Recon Marine understanding the political sensitivities involved. Non-lethal approaches preferred when possible. But you are authorized to use lethal force if necessary to protect the team or the mission. Our priority is completing the extraction without escalation, but not at the cost of operator safety. The questions continued, each probing potential weaknesses or contingencies. Ray welcomed this critical analysis. These were professionals who understood that thorough planning and anticipating potential failure points were essential to mission success. After addressing their questions, Ray shifted to the detailed preparation phase. We have 5 hours until insertion. Equipment check and familiarization starts now. Communications protocols, call signs, and authentication procedures are in your mission packets. Study them, memorize them, then destroy them. He assigned specific preparation tasks to each specialist. Washington would configure their secure communications systems. Winters would analyze structural details for potential breaching requirements. Reyes would brief the team on cartel tactical responses they might encounter, and Dr. Chen would prepare specialized medical kits for each team member. Final briefing and rehearsal at 1100 hours, Ray concluded. Wheels up at 1300. Any last questions before we begin preparation? Alexis Reyes spoke up, her experience with cartel operations bringing a critical perspective. Vega's personal security. Detail, what's our approach if they're with him during extraction? It was a crucial question. According to intelligence, Vega maintained at least 4 bodyguards with him at all times, all former military with specialized close protection training. Primary plan is to isolate and separate them if possible, Ray answered. If that's not viable, we neutralize them using non-lethal methods when possible. Dr. Chen has prepared specialized sedative delivery systems for this contingency. Chen nodded confirmation. Fast-acting compounds delivered via compressed air darts, effective within seconds, no lasting effects. With no further questions, the team dispersed to their assigned preparation tasks. Ray moved between groups, overseeing the equipment preparation while addressing specific concerns from each specialist. The atmosphere was focused but calm. These were professionals who had prepared for high-risk operations under compressed timelines throughout their careers. At the communication station, Marcus Washington had already established secure links with their overhead surveillance assets. Satellite coverage is confirmed through the entire operation window, he reported to Ray. Thermal imaging online, signal intercept capabilities established. We're picking up their communications already. Standard. Security protocols, nothing to indicate they're expecting trouble. This was promising. If Vega's compound maintained normal patterns, the element of surprise would be preserved. In the weapons preparation area, Sam and Maria were configuring their specialized equipment, while Alexis Reyes provided insights on what they might encounter. Vega's security teams use standardized patrol patterns, she explained, having studied cartel tactics extensively after her defection. 2-man teams, 15-minute rotations, radio check-ins at predetermined points. Miss 1 check-in, and they'll investigate casually. Miss 2 consecutive check-ins, and they'll initiate full security protocols. Ray absorbed this information, adjusting his mental timeline accordingly. So we have approximately 15 minutes from neutralizing the first security element before we need to be concerned about raised alarms. Correct, Alexis confirmed, though they might accelerate that timeline if they suspect something's wrong. Across the hangar, Jamie Winters had constructed a detailed structural model of the compound using the architectural intelligence provided. Main vulnerabilities are here and here, she indicated to Bryant. The security office adjacent to the front entrance has thinner walls due to recent renovations. And this section of the perimeter wall was damaged and repaired about 6 months ago. The concrete composition is inconsistent with the original construction, making it potentially weaker. Bryant noted these details, already planning how to exploit such structural weaknesses if alternate entry or exit routes became necessary. Dr. Chen had established a mini medical station where he was preparing specialized equipment for the operation. Each team member gets one of these, he explained to Ray, displaying a compact medical kit. Specialized hemostatic agents, pressure bandages, and a single-dose auto-injector of advanced combat stimulant, if needed, for emergency extraction. Ray examined the kit with approval, and for Vega, Chen produced a separate case containing several preloaded syringes. Sedatives calibrated for his estimated body weight. The primary option will render him compliant but conscious, able to walk with assistance but not resist. The secondary option will fully sedate him if we need to physically carry him out. The preparations continued with precise efficiency, each specialist focused on their area of expertise while maintaining awareness of the overall mission requirements. Ray moved between groups, ensuring integration and addressing any concerns that arose. At 1100 hours, he called the team back together for the final briefing. The atmosphere had shifted subtly, the analytical planning phase giving way to the focused readiness that preceded actual execution. "Final checks," Ray announced, standing before the tactical display. "Communications," Marcus responded immediately. "All systems operational. Encryption protocols verified. Backup channels established. Real-time satellite feed confirmed for the entire mission window. Weapons and tactical gear?" Sam provided a concise status update. "All weapons checked, test-fired, and loaded with appropriate ammunition. Non-lethal options configured and verified. Night vision, breaching equipment, and tactical gear distributed according to team assignments." "Medical?" Dr. Chen nodded. "All kits prepared and distributed. Extraction-specific equipment loaded onto both helicopters. Sedation options prepared for the target and potential hostiles. Vehicles and insertion platforms." Jake, who had been coordinating with the helicopter crews, reported, "Both Black Hawks fueled and prepared for insertion. Pilots briefed on approach vectors, insertion techniques, and extraction protocols. Ground vehicles positioned at alternate extraction points as contingency." Ray nodded his satisfaction. "Intel update?" Alexis stepped forward. "Latest satellite pass completed 20 minutes ago. Normal activity patterns at the compound. Supply helicopter confirmed to be preparing for departure from its base approximately 100 kilometers south. No indications that our operation has been compromised." This was the critical piece. Their plan relied on intercepting and replacing the legitimate supply helicopter crew without alerting the compound to the substitution. According to the intelligence, the regular supply flight departed from a private airfield controlled by Los Serpientes, following a predictable route to Vega's compound. "Our intercept team is in position," Ray confirmed. "They'll secure the helicopter and crew at the refueling stop approximately 30 minutes before arrival at the compound. We'll receive confirmation once that phase is complete." The intercept team, a separate CIA asset not directly connected to their operation, would ensure the legitimate supply helicopter never reached its destination, allowing Ray's team to approach using the expected flight path and schedule. "Final review of execution timeline," Ray continued, displaying the mission chronology on the tactical screen. 300, departure from current location. 25, rendezvous with secured supply helicopter. 40, approach to target compound. 300, Alpha Team. Insertion via supply helicopter 1410. Bravo Team insertion via fast rope once helipad secured. 1430, target acquisition and preparation for extraction. 1430, 1445. Primary extraction via helipad 1500. Latest allowable departure from Mexican airspace contingencies. Ray prompted, wanting to hear the team verbalize their understanding of potential complications and responses. Jake stepped forward. "If the supply helicopter is compromised before our arrival, we abort and establish a new timeline." Maria continued, "If our insertion is detected, we accelerate to immediate execution, prioritizing speed over stealth." Sam added, "If the target cannot be extracted via the primary route, we implement contingency Bravo, ground extraction through the breach point prepared by Charlie Team." Bryant completed the review. "If communication is compromised, we revert. to established fallback protocols and predetermined extraction timelines. Ray nodded his approval. Each team member understood not just their primary responsibilities, but the potential contingencies and adaptations that might be required. This was the mark of experienced operators, the ability to adhere to plan while remaining flexible enough to respond to changing conditions. Final thoughts before gear up? Ray asked, giving each specialist an opportunity to raise any last-minute concerns. Dr. Chen spoke up. Medical reminder: the target must remain medically stable throughout extraction. If sedation becomes necessary, ensure proper airway management during transport. Alexis added a critical insight from her experience with cartel operations. Vega's personal security will fight to the death if cornered. Creating an exit path for them can actually reduce resistance rather than intensifying it. Marcus had a communications observation. Signal analysis indicates the compound conducts a radio check precisely at 14:30 hours. We should time our most sensitive extraction phase either before or after this window to minimize the risk of missed responses, triggering additional scrutiny. Ray integrated these final points into the operational timeline, making subtle adjustments to account for the radio check and security response patterns. Very well, he concluded. Gear up. Final equipment checks complete by 12:45. Weapons hot confirmation at 12:55. Wheels up at 1300 precisely. The team dispersed to their final preparation activities with the calm focus that defined elite operators. Ray moved to a quiet corner of the hangar, using these last moments before execution to center himself mentally. This was a familiar ritual from his Delta Force days, the deliberate mental transition from planning to execution mode. Hargrove approached, having observed the final briefing from a discreet distance. Impressive preparation, he commented. Your team works together as if they've been a unit for years. Professional recognizes professional, Ray replied simply. These people are the best at what they do. They don't need micromanagement, just clear objectives and the autonomy to achieve them. And you're confident in the timeline. It seems aggressive. Ray's expression remained neutral. The timeline is dictated by operational realities, not preference. The longer we're in Mexican territory, the greater the risk of compromise. We move fast, execute precisely, and extract before additional forces can be mobilized. Hargrove nodded, accepting the assessment. The extraction of Vega alive is the absolute priority. All other considerations are secondary. My team understands the mission parameters, Ray assured him. But I'll tell you what I told them. Operator, safety is never secondary. If the situation deteriorates to where the choice becomes completing the mission or ensuring my people's survival, I'll choose my people every time. It was a principle Ray had lived by throughout his career, sometimes at the cost of official approval. Men like Hargrove, who planned operations from comfortable offices, occasionally forgot that even the most elite operators weren't expendable assets. Let's hope that choice doesn't become necessary, Hargrove said diplomatically. Good hunting, Mendoza. As the CIA man withdrew, Ray rejoined his team for the final preparations. Equipment was being loaded onto the helicopters according to the carefully planned distribution. Each operator moved with practiced efficiency, conducting last. Checks on weapons, communications gear, and specialized equipment. Status? Ray asked Jake, who was supervising the loading process. On schedule, Jake confirmed, both birds nearly loaded. Teams are geared up and running final systems checks now." Ray nodded his approval, then addressed the assembled operators. "Circle up." The team formed around him, a moment of quiet focus before the mission began in earnest. In his Delta Force days, Ray had never been one for dramatic pre-mission speeches. His approach was always simple, direct, and focused on the essentials. "We've planned thoroughly, we've accounted for contingencies, and we've prepared for complications," he told them. "Now we execute with precision and adapt as needed. Trust your training, trust your teammates, and maintain situational awareness at all times." Questions? There were none, just the focused readiness of professionals prepared to execute their assigned tasks. "Mount up," Ray ordered, checking his watch. "Departure in 7 minutes." The team moved to their assigned helicopters. Alpha and Bravo teams to the lead Black Hawk, Charlie team to the second. Ray conducted one final mental review of the mission parameters as he boarded, visualizing key phases and potential decision points. At precisely 1300 hours, the helicopters lifted off, banking south toward the Mexican border and the intercept point where they would transition to the captured supply helicopter. The mission clock was running, each minute bringing them closer to one of the most dangerous cartel leaders in the hemisphere, and the high-stakes extraction that would test every skill they possessed. In the helicopter, Ray received a secure transmission from the intercept team. "Package secured," came the coded confirmation. "Platform ready for transfer at designated coordinates." Their first potential failure point had been successfully navigated. The legitimate supply helicopter had been intercepted without alerting the compound. Now they would transfer to that helicopter for the final approach, maintaining the expected flight profile that would arouse no suspicion from Vega's security teams. Ray looked at his assembled team, each operator mentally preparing in their own way for what was to come. Jake checked his weapons with methodical precision. Alexis reviewed satellite imagery of the approach path one final time. In the second helicopter, Bryant would be configuring breaching charges, Marcus calibrating signal intercept equipment, and Jamie finalizing structural analysis for potential alternate extraction routes. They were among the most elite operators in the world, brought together for a high-risk mission that would have been assigned to an official military unit under normal circumstances. But there was nothing normal about extracting a cartel leader from sovereign foreign territory, which is precisely why Ray and his team had been selected instead. As the helicopters approached the transfer point, Ray keyed his radio one final time. "All elements, comms check." Each team leader responded in sequence, confirming operational readiness. The mission was now fully underway, a precision operation to extract one of the most dangerous men in North America from his fortified compound. What had begun as a seemingly routine convoy security contract had evolved into something far more complex and consequential. But for Ray Mendoza, this wasn't unfamiliar territory. It was, in many ways, a return to the high-stakes operations that had defined his career with Delta Force. Different context, different team, but the same fundamental challenge, achieving the nearly impossible through superior preparation, precise execution, and the unique capabilities of elite operators working in perfect coordination. Los Serpientes had already learned not to underestimate Ray Mendoza and his team once. Now their leader was about to receive the same education, a lesson delivered by the kind of professionals who operated in the shadows, completing missions that officially never happened against odds that would be insurmountable for anyone else. The Black Hawks touched down on American soil exactly 47 minutes after extracting from Vega's compound. Ray's expression remained impassive as medical personnel rushed forward to secure their high-value target. Alejandro Vega, the most dangerous cartel leader in North America, lay sedated on a stretcher, alive and stable, exactly as the mission parameters had required. The extraction had gone both better and worse than planned. Alpha Team's infiltration via the supply helicopter had proceeded flawlessly, with Ray, Jake, and Alexis neutralizing the receiving party without raising alarms. Bravo Team's insertion had followed precisely on schedule, establishing the secure perimeter around the main building, while Charlie Team provided crucial overwatch from the ridgeline. The complication had come during the actual extraction of Vega from his office. They'd found him not alone, but in a meeting with 3 Mexican government officials. A development that explained why his security detail had been positioned differently than intelligence had indicated. Securing Vega without harming the officials had required split-second adaptation, with Dr. Chen's non-lethal options proving invaluable. The extraction had nearly derailed when one of Vega's bodyguards managed to trigger a silent alarm, forcing the team to accelerate their timeline and fight their way back to the helipad. Bryant's Charlie Team had created the perfect diversion by selectively disabling compound security systems in a pattern suggesting a perimeter breach from the opposite direction, drawing critical forces away from the actual extraction route. "All personnel accounted for?" Hargrove asked, approaching as Ray supervised the transfer of their prisoner to the secure transport vehicle. "All present. Minimal injuries," Ray confirmed. Maria had sustained a minor gunshot graze to her shoulder during the extraction, and Sam had 3 broken fingers from close-quarters combat with Vega's security detail. Otherwise, the team had emerged remarkably intact given the intensity of the operation. "The mission is officially complete," Hargrove said. "Vega will be transported to a secure facility for debriefing. The intelligence we extract from him could dismantle Los Serpientes entirely." Ray watched as his team methodically secured equipment and prepared for debriefing. They had executed a near-impossible mission with precision and adaptability that would have impressed even his former Delta Force commanders. What had begun as a seemingly routine convoy security operation had evolved into one of the most significant covert actions against cartel leadership in recent years. "The Mexican officials who witnessed the extraction," Ray asked, knowing this diplomatic complication would require careful management. "Being handled through back channels," Hargrove assured him. "Their presence was unexpected but not catastrophic. We have leverage with each of them that ensures their cooperation." Ray nodded, though he remained skeptical of such assurances. In his experience, diplomatic complications rarely resolved as cleanly as intelligence officials suggested. But that was no longer his concern. His team had completed their assigned mission, delivering Vega alive as required. 3 days later, Ray sat on the porch of his ranch house in southern Arizona, watching the sunset paint the desert landscape in shades of amber and gold. The debriefings had been extensive, but were finally complete. His team had dispersed, returning to their regular lives with substantial compensation for the risks they'd taken. The secure satellite phone on the table beside him vibrated with an incoming call. Ray checked the display, recognizing Hargrove's encrypted number. "Mendoza," he answered. "Just calling to deliver some news," Hargrove said without preamble. "Intelligence," extracted from Vega has already led to the seizure of 3 major distribution networks and the identification of 17 corrupted officials. Los Serpientes is fragmenting without his leadership. Good, Ray replied simply. The operation's impact had exceeded even Hargrove's optimistic projections. There's more, the CIA man continued. The information Vega provided about rival cartels has given us unprecedented insight into their operations. We're positioning for additional actions in the coming months. Your team performed exceptionally. We'd like to retain your services for these follow-up operations. Ray had been expecting this offer. The successful extraction of Vega had demonstrated capabilities that few private contractors could match. The CIA would naturally want to leverage that proven competence for additional high-risk missions. I'll discuss it with my team, Ray said, non-committal. They decide for themselves. Of course, Hargrove agreed. But I should mention that authorization has been granted for whatever resources you require. Full operational autonomy as before. After ending the call, Ray sat back in his chair, contemplating the implications. He had left Delta Force seeking a simpler life, one with fewer moral complexities and life or death decisions. Yet here he was being drawn back into the shadow world of deniable operations and high-stakes missions. His phone buzzed with a text message from Jake. Team dinner tomorrow night. Everyone's confirmed. Ray smiled slightly. Despite the risks they'd faced, the team had bonded through shared danger in ways that couldn't be manufactured or trained. Whether they chose to accept Hargrove's offer of continued operations was a decision for tomorrow. Tonight, Ray was content knowing they had completed a nearly impossible mission and emerged intact. What had begun as a cartel ambush on a medical convoy had evolved into something far more significant, a demonstration that sometimes the most dangerous opponents aren't the obvious ones. Sometimes they're the unassuming driver with 15 years of Delta Force experience and a team of specialists who know exactly how to turn the tables on those who underestimate them. If you've enjoyed this incredible true story of how a seemingly normal convoy driver turned the tables on one of Mexico's most dangerous cartels, make sure to subscribe to our channel for more extraordinary tales of real-life heroes who operate in the shadows. Next week, we'll bring you the shocking account of how a retired Navy SEAL protected an entire village from a terrorist cell using nothing but his wits and specialized training. You won't want to miss this gripping story of courage under fire. Hit that subscribe button now and turn on notifications to ensure you never miss our weekly releases. If this story touched you, let us know in the comments below where you're watching from and what aspects of Ray's tactical brilliance impressed you most.